Okay, so it's a great pleasure to be with you this afternoon, and I think we had a wonderful lunch, and I hope everybody is sitting fine now and ready for the series of talks that should present some new horizons of computational geometry. So the title of my talk will be computational information geometry, and it will be motivated by Voronoi diagrams in information spaces. So it's not so technical talk because I didn't know which attendees will come and join. And before I start, I would like to thank all the organizers for these beautiful 2 days. It's a lot of memories to see many of you. I've been here 22, 23 years ago, I think. And the first time I met with Prism, at that time at INERIA, was in 92. I was doing my first year intern of École Normale Supérieure de Lyon. Then I did, with Michel Kostner, some training on Parism. And I came back from my internship for DEA, and I began my PhD on adaptive computational geometry under the supervision of Jean Daniel. And I graduated in 96, so it's quite a long ago, and we have already seen that the computational geometry field has moved a lot in many new exciting directions. And I think this afternoon we will have also a new extension and promising direction for geometric computing in various areas or various spaces. So, this is the outline of the talk. I will first start by some problem in statistics that has been rooted with the definition of information geometry in the broad scope, how to define Voronoi diagrams for statistical application. That was one of the origin of information geometry in 1945 by Rao. And I will then introduce some zoo of Voronoi diagrams in information spaces. So the first one will be a Riemannian structure with a Fisher information matrix that will be called Fisher-Rao Riemannian Voronoi diagrams. Then I will concentrate on hyperbolic Voronoi diagram and show its extension in Hilbert projective geometry. And finally I will spend some time on information geometry and the core structure of information geometry, that is a dualistic structure, and show some work that we did in collaboration with Jean Daniel on Bregman Voronoi diagrams. And I will try to revisit it from the flavor of information geometry after already 10 years of experience and maturation of that work. And at the end, I will try to define what we mean by computational information geometry nowadays and how it can be some promising extension of information geometry and computational geometry. So let me start with a very simple task in statistics. So you're given some independently identical and distributed observation, x1, xn, and you have a pool of prior distribution where all those observations can emanate from. So let's say I call them P1 and Pn. And we would like to decide which distribution gave rise to this observation. So this is a very simple task in statistics. And it's called classification. It's called classification because it's not hypothesis testing. It's more like we have to decide from a prior pool of distribution which one it emanates from. So it's a classification. And Rao did some pioneer work in 1945 by considering what he calls a population space. So he assumes some parametric form of the distribution. So P1, Pn belong to some parametric family, like the Gaussian family, for example. And now your distributions are P theta 1, theta n, for it can be, for example, the mu and sigma for Gaussian varlets. And what we do, what we can do, of course, is to first estimate the parameter in that family from the observation. Let's say that you use a maximum likelihood estimator and you get hat theta to be your estimator from M observation. And then you will just choose somehow the distribution among your set of distribution according to some statistical distances. So it will be d p theta prime. And of course, because it's a parametric family that you've chosen, it amounts to some parametric distance where you can have equivalent distance on the parameters. And this is what I've been noting d param. Okay, so is that pointer working? So basically here, you will estimate my hat theta from the observation. And if I define some statistical distance d, then basically it will be to do some kind of nearest neighbor classification among those points. And of course, the cells that have the same classification define Voronoi cells. Okay, and the more observation you have, your estimator will change. So as the number of observation M will increase, you get closer and closer to the true parameter theta star. And if your estimator is efficient, Fisher efficient, then in the limit you will stick to the point inside one of the generators of the Voronoi diagrams. So both Voronoi diagrams in statistical spaces, in population spaces, and proximity queries are important for this classification problem. So I told you that this was one of the first applications of statistical Voronoi diagrams, and the structure that has been first revealed was the Riemannian structure, and the statistical Voronoi diagrams are called Fisher-Rao Riemannian Voronoi diagrams. So I will define them, and I will show you some very tight connection with hyperbolic Voronoi diagrams. So what is Fisher-Rao Riemannian geometry? So it's a Riemannian geometry. So you have a manifold M, like your set of Gaussian density, and you have to choose some Riemannian metric, G, a metric tensor field. And one very good candidate for doing so is to choose what we call the Fisher information metric. So that is defined here. Maybe you saw it here. So it's the expectation of the derivative of the log. Okay. And this is because for regular models, this is a positive definite matrix. It gives you a metric tensor field. And so the film gives you the Fisher information matrix. And it can define on its tangent plane some inner product, a smooth inner product. And you will have the inner product between two vectors at the tangent plane p theta, uv, to be just defined with the Fisher information matrix here, once you choose the basis b for the coefficients of your vector. Okay? And how do you define now a statistical distance? You just take the geodesic distance, that is called also the information distance. So in Riemannian geometry, you define the geodesic as minimizing, locally minimizing curve, and you will define the distance between two distributions to be the Riemannian geodesic's length between your two things. So this is written in this usual expression here. So at the early stages, a lot of geodesic distance have been computing. It requires two things to compute the geodesics for parametric families of distribution according to the Fisher information matrix. But unfortunately, there are some missing candidates because we use a lot of multivariate normals, but we don't know any closed form Fisher-Rao distance for multivariate normal distribution, and it's one of the drawbacks of this modeling. So some common examples of Fisher Riemannian geometry is if you consider the categorical distribution, and if you compute, as I will show you, the Fisher information metric, you will find that it is constant positive curvature for the manifold, for the statistical manifold. If you consider location scale families like Cauchy distribution or Gaussian distribution, you will find that for any location scale families, it's constant negative curvature. And of course, if you consider just location families that can be eventually multidimensional, you will find that the Fisher-Rao geometry is flat. Okay, so you have three kinds of curvatures here by this modeling, depending on your Fisher information matrix. So this is a case of the spherical geometry that I mentioned before. So you have, let's say, you are in dimension 3. So you have the simplex here. You can embed by the square root embedding into the positive hortant of the sphere. If you compute the Fisher information matrix for these special cases here, you find this, the matrix coefficient there. And if you have the great geodesic arcs that are geodesics, and you compute the Fisher-Rao distance as this expression here. Okay. So as I told you, one very nice example actually is how you get hyperbolic geometry by considering location scale families. So this was surprising because somehow in some written notes of Professor Hoteling, who was very famous for econometrics, yeah, and he studied differential geometry at Princeton before, and actually in some of his notes that were not published, he already considered the location scale families 15 years before Rao. And so location scale families is densities, you take a standard distribution P, and you have a group of location scales, so that you can define for location L and scale S this family of density here, and this is called a location scale family. So for example, for Gaussian distribution, P will be the standard Gaussian. And if you compute the 2D FIM, Fisher information matrix, for such a parametric location scale family, you will find that it is constant and of negative curvature, and you will find that the curvature is -1/b squared, and you will have this expression for the curvature strength of that model. So it explains why, for example, if I take this location scale family, the univariate Gaussian densities with mu and sigma, you have the FIM, Fisher information matrix, that is this diagonal matrix, and you can visualize, for example, geodesics here on the pseudosphere between two densities by those curves, okay? And I can represent it on the upper plane. Here you will have the same visualization, but on the upper plane. Or I can also visualize that thing with the density, and then the interpolation will be just moving along the geodesic, okay? So it's one way also to interpolate or extrapolate densities. Okay, so hyperbolic geometry is very useful for location scale families if you use Fisher-Rao geometry. And I've been studying hyperbolic Voronoi diagram at that time. And many people use conformal models like Poincaré Gauge or Poincaré upper plane conformal models. But I was looking at non-conformal models, which is, for example, the Klein model of hyperbolic geometry. Because in that space, in the disk, in the Klein ball, what you will have is you will have geodesics that are straight Euclidean lines. So this means that all the toolbox for computational geometry for making intersection and computation is very easy to use. And if you write the distance, Klein hyperbolic distance between 2 points P and Q, you will find that this is this formula with R cos H, okay? So because the Voronoi diagram doesn't change with some increasing function, you can remove the R cos, and if you look at the bisector, you will find this expression here in red. So you will see that it is a affine bisector, so it's an hyperplane that is clipped by the Klein disk. And then I realized some work of Jean Daniel, where he has a very nice survey in this editing book on curve and affine Voronoi diagrams. And if you cite theorem 13, it says that any abstract diagram with affine bisectors, this is what I have with my Klein hyperbolic Voronoi diagram, is identical to the power diagram of some set of spheres in the same dimension. So for me, it was very interesting. And I'm going to make the connection just by recalling what is a power diagram. So power diagram, you have a set of spheres with center C and radius R. You can take R as a weight if you want, so you can rename it W. And you define the power distance, which is a sign distance, so it's not really a proper distance per se, as this expression, dpo. And if you look at the bisector between two spheres for the power distance, you will find this expression, which is of course an affine bisector. And you just notice that here, what I can do is that if I to cast radius to weights, I can add some any relative value delta, and I do not change the equation of the bisector. So I may assume that all the weights in my Voronoi power diagrams are positive. It doesn't change. Okay, so this is, for example, one power diagram on the plane, and we have some nice results. It's also power diagrams in Lagrange geometry. We have results on the combinatorial complexity, and we have also construction time. Okay, so it's like ordinary Voronoi diagrams. So to come back to my hyperbolic Voronoi diagrams, I recall you the equation that I had for my bisector, which was affine. Now, if I divide by a square root of 1 minus norm p square times square root of 1 minus q square, I can match the bisector equation of power diagrams with this center for the sphere and the weights here. I do not take the square radius, but I just take the weights. Okay, and you will find this equivalent power diagram. So basically, what we do for computing a hyperbolic Voronoi diagram in Klein model is we compute an equivalent power diagram, okay, and we clip it by the sphere. So in general, a power diagram may have empty cells, But for hyperbolic Voronoi diagrams, of course, all cells are non-empty. Okay, so this is a way of choosing the weight that guarantees that. So the goal is how to clip this power diagram efficiently. And so first of all, I may say that the complexity of hyperbolic Voronoi diagram was already mentioned in one of the books of Jean Daniel, a very famous book, because when I was doing my PhD, Jean Daniel and Mariette had a very hot discussion at that time on each chapter, and I remember reading some of them. So, but you can see that it was already there as a result of the complexity of hyperbolic Voronoi diagram. Of course, what we can do is we can extend it to higher order, like by choosing not by defining the cells that are closest to 2 or k generators. So many of them are empty, but the non-empty ones you can see, like for example here it's a 2-order Voronoi diagrams. And if I click on any point on this yellow area Voronoi cells, the nearest 2 neighbors will be the 2 red points that define these 2-order Voronoi cells. Okay, and you can because it's again bisector clip by the Klein-Boll, you can compute as an equivalent power diagram, but it's not very efficient way to do it because you have to choose all the K size subsets. So we have some better algorithms that look at the K level of the arrangement of hyperplanes. Okay, so once we have one efficient algorithm for computing a hyperbolic Voronoi diagram, we can change it to other models. So here you have a visualization into the conformal Klein-Boll, and here's the conformal upper plane. Okay, it's just a Mobius transformation. So let me show you maybe some videos. The full video is available online. So here you see in Poincaré. Here you have an overlay of Klein and Poincaré. And of course, we can make translation. This is the upper plane, and we can make recentering by Mobius transformation. I just want to show you. Okay. Maybe next I will show you. For some reason, the video has been shrunk. It's not the latest version of my slides, but okay. And again, so the critical point is how to cut this power diagram by a unit ball. And Jean Daniel also looked at this problem in a different context, in the context of computing the envelope of convex hull of spheres. And he showed that it was a combinatorial structure was equivalent to a power diagram clipped by a unit ball. So this is the same procedure that can be applied. And I may also say that at that time, the team was working also on a hyperbolic Voronoi diagram for Seagal, and they had a nice package now in Seagal, where I took this picture here, where you can see both the Delaunay complex on the left and the hyperbolic Voronoi diagrams in a Poincaré ball. Okay. So the Klein model, as I told you, is not conformal. So this means that if I plot the tensor field by showing this kind of ellipses for visualizing the metric tensor field, you will see that it is not spheres, but it is ellipsoids that have different orientations. But at the origin, it's conformal. So if you want to show that the geodesic intersect the bisector orthogonally, you can do it very easily by recentering your 2 points passing through the origin, and you have a second point Q that will be minus P. You rewrite that bisector, you get this thing, and then it's obvious to see that it is orthogonal to the geodesic, which is a straight line. So you have a very easy proof to show that both structures intersect orthogonally. Okay, now I want to show you an extension of hyperbolic Voronoi diagram to some geometry that has been not so much studied, also very interesting, and this is called Hilbert geometry. Not to be confused with Hilbert space, where you have inner product and can be infinite dimensional geometry. This one is a projective geometry, where you take a bonding convex body, like for example here it can be a simplex or it can be some kind of smooth shape, and you take 2 points, P and Q. The line passing through it will intersect the boundary in 2 other points. So you have 4 points, your 2 points with the lines and the 2 points that intersect the boundary. You make the cross ratio of that and you take the logarithm of it. Okay? And if you do it, you have a metric. And what is nice is that the straight line is a geodesic in that metric. So it's also quite helpful to compute. And in that case, if we take the simplex, and I just plot in that Hilbert simplex geometry balls, I will have hexagonal shapes like that. Okay. So this is a ball of same radius. I move just the center in that domain, and I use this definition for the distance to define a ball. Okay. So you have hexagonal Euclidean shapes for Hilbert ball in simplex geometry. And if you look for the Voronoi diagrams and bisectors for that Hilbert simplex geometry, you will find that sometimes it is a hyperplane, or sometimes it is piecewise linear. Okay, and you will find also Voronoi vertices here. Actually, if the domain is not a simplex, things can get more nasty. Like here, we have 2 generators on the diagonal of a square. The domain is a square. And we see that the bisector is not affine anymore. So the role of the simplex domain is very particular. And in fact, you can show that for the Hilbert simplex geometry, the geometry that you have is isometric to a norm vector space. This was one of the work of De La Harpe, who also worked on geometry of group, I think. Wrote some books on it. And this is the equivalence between Hilbert projective geometry on the simplex and the equivalent vector space with the norm here. Okay, so basically what you define is you define the vector space in dimension d plus 1 by this equation, and then you have the conversion between point in a simplex and point in that vector space, and to define the distance of the norm h here, you have to define the shape of the norm by 1, saying it's 1, and you have the shape here by BV, defined as follows. So I will show you. Here you have two balls, you have the level sets of balls in the Hilbert simplex geometry, and here you have the equivalent polyhedral or polytopic norm in the equivalent isometric norm space. And as you can see, also for Hilbert simplex geometry, it's not uniquely geodesic. If I have 2 points P and Q, I can shade the gray area, and in the gray area, any point here will have equality for the triangle inequality of the metric. Okay, so it's not uniquely geodesic space. It's like the L1 norm Voronoi. You have this kind of thing happening. So we use this to do clustering of histograms that we visualize as points in high-dimensional simplex. And we use k-means, a k-center, or enclosing ball, and compare to that thing. So once again, I want to make some citation to some work of Jean Daniel. I remember when I was doing my PhD that they were working on that topic, actually. And they have a nice paper on Voronoi diagrams under polyhedral distance functions. So we have some combinatorial complexity with Mariette also on that topic. Here you have the L1 bisector, and you have L1 Voronoi diagrams, and they show basically that whenever you have a polytope norm, you can have a degenerate configuration where it is combinatorially n to the d, like quadratic in 2D, for example. Okay. So a particular case of Hilbert projective geometry, if you take the disk, you get hyperbolic Voronoi diagram. Okay, Klein geometry is just one example of Hilbert projective geometry. There's another kind of geometry that is called Cayley-Klein. And in Cayley-Klein, what you do is you consider the bounding convex domain to be some ellipsoid. And because of the equation of the ellipsoid, you can make the log cross ratio into this closed formulae. Okay? And if you do that, you will find first that you can define what we call negatively curved and positively curved Cayley-Klein geometry. And here, this is a kind of balls that you have for Malanobis distance in blue, which is flat, and elliptic, which is a positive curvature, and hyperbolic, which is in green here. So you have some notion of curved Malanobis distances that we can use as a generalization of Malanobis distance. And it's not surprising that the bisector is again an hyperplane. And here we have to just cut, not by the ball, we use homogeneous coordinates, but we have to cut by the domain, which is an ellipsoid. So here, this is in homogeneous coordinates, the equation of the boundary of the ellipsoid here, so different things. Okay, so now that I have introduced Voronoi diagrams and I first motivated it by classification tasks in statistics, I'm going to enter the main topic of information geometry, the dualistic structure of information geometry. And I want to do it without putting too much background material, so I will wave my hands a lot, but I will try to make the message clear. So let's see if we achieve this. So first, Fischer-Rao geometry and Fischer-Rao Voronoi diagrams are very helpful. They are very sound and grounded theoretically. But as I told you, the problem for multivariate Gaussians is that we don't have closed form solution. And this is making a lot of limitation from algorithmic point of view. And in order to have a closed form solution, we need to solve two things. First, we need to solve the Euler-Lagrange ordinary differential equation for finding the geodesics, which can be very tricky. And then we need to integrate the infinitesimal length element along that geodesic. And we don't know how to do it for Gaussian, multivariate Gaussian distribution. So people have been working on approximation algorithm with geodesic shooting methods before. So here you can see bivariate normals. Okay, you have a mu which is in 2D, and you have a 2D covariance matrix. In red, you have the different kind of initial and target things, and you have the geodesic path here that is plotted in the density space here, like that. And you can see this is only approximation by geodesic shooting. We don't have closed form for computing the distances. So what has been done is an extension of Fischer-Rao geometry by a dualistic structure in information geometry, and this was done in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and now it's very well understood for parametric models. And the way is to decouple the metric tensor field from the Levi-Civita connection. So basically, we are going to consider affine connection, and because I guess most of you may not have heard about the topic, I will introduce it very quickly. What happens in Riemannian geometry is when you want to measure vector length or angle on a tangent plane, you use a metric tensor to do it. And the metric tensor G also defines one way to connect the tangent planes by something that is called the Levi-Civita connection. But you're not obliged to choose this Levi-Civita connection. You can choose any affine connection to make a connection between two very close by tangent planes. Okay, and this is a work, a very pioneer work of Elie Cartan in the 1920s, and actually he generalized the Einstein theory of relativity by considering torsion of different affine connection with torsion. What I want to say is that the one that we use by default when we have a G is this Nabla LC for Levi-Civita. But if we choose another thing, something different happens. And affine connection is related to curvature of manifold as follows. So here I have a vector. So those manifolds are embedded here for visualization. And here I will say that I have a flat connection because if I take a loop, a small loop here, and I move my vector according to Nabla, to the equation of Nabla, I will find again the same vector here. Okay, so for the affine connection point of view, this connection is flat. Okay, so the cylinder is flat. If I take a sphere and I move again according to a connection, this red vector according to Nabla, here I will not end up with the same initial vector, and the angle shift is related to curvature. Okay, so this is a non-flat thing. And what happens in information geometry is that compared to Riemannian geometry, we have a dual pair of affine connection, Nabla and Nabla star. And those Nabla and Nabla star, they give two ways to define geodesics. Geodesics will not be minimizing length curve. They will be just auto-parallel curves. Okay? So you preserve the parallel transport along the tangent vectors of the geodesics. And so the structure is not MG for Riemannian geometry, but it's MG, Nabla, Nabla star. So for example, here I have 2 points, and in information geometry, there will be no notion of distances. Okay, maybe you have, maybe you don't have, but you have 2 ways to connect 2 points by what is called Nabla geodesic and Nabla star geodesic. Okay, and it's not related to the length as in Riemannian case. Okay. And what happens is that if the 2 geodesics are torsion-free and also flat, then you have a canonical distance that is called the Bregman distance. And what we did with Jean Daniel at that time is we consider the Bregman-Voronoi diagrams, but from the viewpoint of analytical point of view and not really geometric point of view. So I will recall you the results that we get in a new flavor. So a Bregman divergence is defined for a convex generator F. You have the function F that is strictly convex, and also we will assume it to be C3. And we will define the divergence between θ1 and θ2, so it's a parameter divergence, to be this equation here. And this equation, what does it say? It says that you measure the vertical gap at θ1 between the point f θ1 and the point, the tangent line that goes through θ2 and at the abscisse θ1. So this equation in the red box here. It's just a vertical gap by this double red arrow, okay? And because it is strictly convex, it is equal to 0 if and only if θ1 equal θ2. And what is good about Bregman divergence is that it unifies a lot of things that we have been using in different areas, like for example, Euclidean geometry, the square Euclidean distance, and people doing information theory like relative entropy, which is called Kullback-Leibler divergence. So we have some way to unify a lot of things. And if I want to introduce what is the underlying information geometry structure of that, it's what we can call a Bregman manifold. And actually, the metric tensor is just a Hessian structure. So you will have the metric tensor that is the Hessian of F, and you will have the Nabla connection, the first connection that will be defined as follow, as third order derivative. And because you can find a coordinate system that it is 0, you know that it is flat. I go fast, but in differential geometry, this is one way to characterize flatness. And of course, because we have a convex function, we can consider the Legendre Fenchel transformation to get a dual convex conjugate. I will denote it by F star. And we have a dual Riemannian metric, G star, and which is again the Hessian of S star. And we have the connection again in the over coordinate system eta that equals to 0. So we have the dual connection that is also flat, torsion free and flat. So we have dual flatness. This is why it's also called dually flat space. And this is a Bregman manifold because any dually flat space, you can go from this equation and recover F. Okay, so you have a canonical divergence. And moreover, we have something that was found in the 70s for convex duality, is that if you take the product, if here the matrix products of the Hessian for theta and eta, you have the identity matrix, and this is just saying that that the basis is mutually orthogonal with the dual basis. So you have a geometric interpretation of that. So for example, if I take my Gaussian, my mu sigma space, okay, I have a dually flat manifold of mu sigma. I have two univariate Gaussians, P and Q, and I have two ways to go from P to Q. Either I work on the primal geodesic or I work in the dual geodesic, and you will have this kind of interpolation here that will be the formulae that you recover somehow. And what happens is that the Bregman divergence that I mentioned here, you can express it in the theta parameter or in the dual expectation parameter, or you can mix the parameters in something that we can call the Fenchel-Young divergence here. Okay. So you have many kind of equivalent formulae in a dually flat space. And what is attractive is that if you take this convex function to be the cumulant of some exponential family, then you know that this Bregman divergence is equivalent to Kullback-Leibler divergence. Okay? So you go from B to Kullback-Leibler, but not the other way. Okay? So with Jean-Daniel, we study the shape of the bisector. And we can define two kinds of bisector, or if you want, the Nabla bisector and the Nabla star bisector, or the E bisector and the M bisector. And we can show that there are autoparallel submanifolds. And if you can visualize it either in the theta or in the eta primal or dual coordinate system. If you want a visualization, you choose one of the two dual coordinate systems and you rasterize this equation, and you will find one that is affine in one coordinate system and curved in the other. But if you think about the geometric object of a bisector, it's just an autoparallel submanifold. And what happens is because it's affine, again, it's equivalent to some power diagram. So this is in this Java here illustrating some affine Bregman-Voronoi diagrams and the equivalent power diagram here.
On the right-hand side,
so we have some kind of interpolation. And the video is online, so you can look at the video. It's a 5-minute explanation. And the Voronoi cells, you can also define it as minimization diagrams in Voronoi, which is very usual. And here you will see that basically if you remove the function for each generator, you define the function di to be the distance between the generator pi and x. Okay, so you have functions now, and you will take the lower envelopes. And for Bregman-Voronoi diagrams of some type, you will find that it is affine because you have a common terms that is recurring to all the generators here. So this is affine Voronoi diagrams. What happens also is that you can define a Bregman sphere by generalizing the paraboloid transformation. And instead of taking the lifting parallelobeded equation, you take the potential function f, and you will make a Bregman sphere as basically you will show that if you draw a Bregman sphere in some coordinate system and you uplift to the surface of the potential function, it will be cut by some hyperplane here. And actually, from the viewpoint of affine differential geometry, this is related to something that is called immersion, affine immersion. So it's a geometry of affine immersion. It's a very nice topic, but it's a bit technical, so I will not talk too much about it now. But the thing is that the generalization of the potential function is made by Bregman divergence. And of course, you can study the dual object, which is a Delaunay complex. And here you will have some example of Delaunay complexes for Bregman distances, and they are embedded. They are dual of regular triangulations that can be embedded into the space. Okay. So just one last thing. In this dually flat space, what we have is we have a generalized Pythagoras theorem. So you remember the Euclidean Pythagoras theorem here. Here you can see it as a square distance. Okay. And you can see that Euclidean geometry is self-dual Bregman geometry. Actually, it's one example. And in Bregman manifold, what you have is you have this Pythagoras theorem that says that if you have a primal geodesic that is orthogonal to the dual geodesic, here in dashed lines, then you have this 3-point identity. Okay. And actually, for Bregman divergences, you have something that is called the 3-point property. That is this equation. And here you can see that eta and theta, they are somehow the tangent vector of the primal geodesic and the dual geodesics, and they are in a covariant and contravariant coefficients. So basically, if you rewrite that equal to, this is equal to this thing, where gamma is a geodesic and gamma star is a dual geodesic. And of course, it is 0 if it is perpendicular. So you recover this thing. So what we have is that the primal geodesic is perpendicular, is orthogonal to the dual bisector, and vice versa. Okay. So what we did is we did later on some kind of proximity queries. So here you have some kind of vantage point tree and partition of space into Bregman balls for proximity queries, like this kind of tree structure. And we had some application also. I go fast because it's almost time. But we had some application for statistics for computing what is called the Chernoff information. The Chernoff information C is this definition for densities. Actually, for the minimum of the exponent, which is called the error exponent, you will find that it amounts to some Bregman divergence. And the way to find the optimal exponent is just the intersection of some geodesic with a dual, the n bisector with the E geodesic. Okay, so you have a simple geometric characterization of that. Okay, I'm going to talk just one more thing very quickly. If in the case that you consider separable Bregman divergences, you can study what is the Riemannian geometry induced by the Hessian of the separable things. And if you do it, the metric tensor is a very simple expression, and you will find that the Bregman-Riemann distances is this closed form here, okay, where this function is here. And the geodesics are also in closed form, so it's very nice, and it has some characteristics. So you use the duality of separable convex generator. I just want to show you that here we have some equivalence of distances that is different from the Bregman dual divergences. And we have some isometry with Euclidean geometry. what is important is that it's very easy to compute such a Voronoi diagram in that space by isometry of the Euclidean diagram. Here you have several rasterization. And here, this is where I want to show you that we can consider 4 types of diagrams, Voronoi diagrams here. The left-sided Bregman-Voronoi diagrams, the right-sided in red. We can consider the symmetrized Bregman in green, and also the Riemann-Bregman in purple, which is a new one. Okay. So this is my last slide. Basically, I wanted to introduce some Voronoi diagrams in the context of statistical application in information space. I mentioned that it started with the Riemannian geometric modeling of Fischer-Rao. And then we saw that information geometry, we had a dually flat space where it amounts to some Bregman-Voronoi diagram. And you can explain the lifting to the potential function by the geometry of affine immersion. And in some cases where you have hyperbolic geometry, you can generalize to Cayley-Klein and Hilbert geometry, and then you have polygonal norm Voronoi diagrams. So my last word is to say, what is computational information geometry? Because this is a question that you often have. You can say, okay, you are interested in making geometric computing in information spaces, but also you are interested in making geometric structure computable. So for example, if my F, my generator, is not in closed form, how can I make all those computation? Because F, I cannot touch it numerically. So what we have done is we have done some work on this area by doing some Monte Carlo sampling on the space of Bregman functions, and to make it tractable. And we have a sequence of geometries that is nearing to the optimal geometry. Okay, so maybe I conclude with this slide. And I want to say again thank you to Jean-Daniel for all his inspiring work, his mentoring, and thank you for your listening. Thank you.
It's about the duality. I mean, the Legendre-Franchel transform plays a role in the so-called tropical geometry. Do you have considered something like this?
No, actually, tropical geometry is also very...
or idempotent analysis, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. So there's some very nice one on power diagrams and deep neural network now, and tropical geometry and power... Okay. There's some work, people doing deep learning. They study like the classification domain and the boundary domain of induced by the deep neural network architecture. And there's some very nice ties with power diagrams and deep learning architecture and tropical geometry and deep learning. If you take ReLU activation function, for example, there's an equivalence. So I didn't work on this topic, but I saw many interesting work going on that aspect.
More questions?
Jean-Daniel.
It's a practical question. Have you applications where you apply these techniques?
So application is that we try to find application by forcing application. So there are several cases. In the 2 papers of Hotelling in 1930 and Fischer-Rao, the 2 first application was hypothesis testing and significance and classification, the one that I mentioned. And Hotelling, when mentioning kind of loxodrome interpolation of densities for biology, for mutation, when you have mutation of genes and you follow as density somehow. Hyperbolic geometry has a lot of importance in machine learning these days because you can embed structured data with low distortion. So this kind of Cayley-Klein and all that is quite useful. Information geometry is computable very easily if you have dually flat space. And so this is the case if you have a convex function. And if you do variational-based inference or variational-based approximation, the natural gradient can be transformed into ordinary gradient in the dual parameter space, and it has been used for making results. So there's a connection with mirror descent methods, natural gradient, and dual ordinary gradient that is well understood for flat spaces. So, but I think applications are still... of course, people doing deep learning, they do a lot of first order, second order optimization techniques, and they work on this so-called neuromanifold, and they try to look at the geometry and how to make more efficient gradient descent on that manifold. So I think this is the most famous applications.